Well, do you remember those guys I mentioned at the start of my first talk? Lewis getting mocked in the kitchen where he works as a chef. Kate losing out on a top job. Sheila having a hard time in the home where she lives with her brother and his wife. Brian getting slandered publicly before the nation. When people are getting hostile to Christians, how should we live? Well, I think we face a few temptations of how to respond. We can be fearful, kind of intimidated, withdraw, hide, disengage from people. So we can just be fearful. We can say, okay, I'm just going to be the same. The fancy word is enculturated. I'm going to become just like the society around me. I just want to fit into the values so no one notices me. I'm just going to be exactly the same. Or we can get angry, be angry, and just get infuriated, just get angry with people. As we see the values change in society, as we begin to feel like outsiders. In Scotland, which was once the nation of the book, the Bible, and we're Christians, but so Scotland's moving very differently from us who still got the book. Well, how are we supposed to respond? What does God have to say? Well, open your Bibles back up to 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2. And I'm going to read from verse 9. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Dear friends, I urge you, as foreigners and exiles, to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. So God's mission strategy for the church is this: be who you are. Who are you, Grace Mount Community Church? Remember verse 10? You are the people of God. You're the people who receive mercy. And since you've come to Jesus, what are you? You're the spiritual temple. You're God's house in Gracemount. You are a royal priesthood. You're a holy nation. A people who especially belong to God. His special possession. He's brought you out of darkness into his wonderful light. And so when it comes to relating to Scotland today, don't be fearful. Don't fit in. Don't get furious. Live out your new identity as the people of God. Be who you are. And there's 3 points I want to draw out from 1 Peter today about what it means to be who you are. And the first 2 are beautifully summarized in verses 11 and 12. So let me read them again. Dear friends, I urge you, as foreigners and exiles, to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Do you know why you feel alienated from Scotland in the 21st century as a Christian? It is because you are an alien and a foreigner in Scotland. You may have been born and grown up here, but actually since you've come to Christ, you belong to a new holy nation. And so you're just going to feel a bit odd. You feel like you don't quite fit in, even in the culture that you grew up in. And that's how Peter describes these Christians in the first century. He wants their new identity to shape how they live. And there's two main ways that they need to live differently. And there's a calling to abstain from evil and to engage in doing good. That's the first two steps. This is God's mission strategy for the New Testament church in Scotland today. It's a call to holiness in verse 11 and helpfulness in verse 12. So let's think about those two then. First of all, be holy. Holy, what does that mean? Well, my toothbrush is holy to me. I'm sure you've heard Andy say something like this. But my toothbrush is holy to me. I bought it. It is for my exclusive use. I don't want my kids to come in and use my toothbrush to clean their shoes. I don't want them to use it to clean the dog's teeth. It is bought by me. It is holy to me. It's my special possession to be used for me to brush my teeth. Well, we are now God's holy people. If you've come to Jesus, you're part of God's holy nation. We're set apart by God for God. He bought us at the cost of the blood of his own Son, so that we may serve and please him. We're for his use. We've been forgiven, we've been saved from an empty way of life, it says in chapter 1. You know, so many people are just living lives today that are just so empty. All they've got to look forward to is an occasional trip to play dodgems to amuse themselves because they know what life's about. We have been redeemed from an empty way of life, and we're called to live in a way that pleases this God who has saved us. We get to glorify him. We get to live a life that advertises how amazing God is, to worship him with all of our lives. And that kind of means doing the things that delight and honour him, and it means keeping away from the things that damage and defile. Each day in our personal lives, we got to make lots of choices. As a church, we got to make choices, don't we? We've got choices to make about how we spend our time, our money, our energy, what we look at in our smartphones or on the TV, what we put into our bodies, what we do with our bodies. Each day's full of temptations, isn't it? To pursue our own sinful desires or to please God. You know, you can pursue your sinful desires, but the Bible reminds us here, you're actually waging war against yourself. Don't we ever thought about it that way? But as you pursue your own sinful desires, do the things you know that basically damage and defile you, you are destroying your soul. Or you can do things that actually build up your soul. They're going to help you. And when I live out my new identity as one of the people of God, I'm going to choose to want to abstain from those sinful desires. See, if I remember as I walk about, you know, who am I? Well, I'm God's. As I gather with other believers, I'm a spiritual temple where God loves to hang out. I'm a royal priest. Well, I'm going to avoid the things that trash that. And I want to pursue holiness that strengthens that. So if you go on to chapter 4, if you look at verse 3 in chapter 4, look across the page there. It's across the page for you. 4 verse 3. You have spent enough time in the past doing what pagans choose to do, living in debauchery, lust, drunkenness, orgies, carousing, detestable idolatry. Kind of a lot of the stuff that Lewis's friends want to joke about a lot in the restaurant. Well, you spend enough time doing that stuff. Now it's time to, having experienced the mercy of God, now live completely differently. All of that stuff's still on offer today, isn't it? People idolize and worship work, money, fame, sex, pleasure, reputation, cars, houses, holidays, relationships. But living for all that stuff instead of the God who gives us all the good gifts, then it's worse than sick. It's detestable idolatry, it says back in chapter 2. God detests it. make a positive difference in Gracemount, we can only do that if we're different to the culture around us. We'll only ever help people if we're different to how people are living, by being God's holy people, by choosing to live that way, empowered by God's Spirit. It's not something we do in our own strength. It's something God puts His Spirit in us to begin to help us to do. Some people say, well, look, if we're going to reach the culture, we need to become more like the culture. Just change our values. Let's ignore the bits in the Bible that don't quite fit where culture's in, and we'll win them that way. It never works. The only way that we're going to make any positive difference is to live out what the Bible has to say, to be holy, to abstain from evil desires that war against the soul. To win people to Jesus, we need to be beautifully different and an alternative community in the way that we live as a church. So be who you are. Step number 1, be different, be holy. And the second way we need to be who we are is in verse 12. We need to be helpful. Look at verse 12 again. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day He visits us. Now Jesus saves us not because we're good people. We've not been good people. He saves us despite that. He saves us because we're not good people. His grace comes into us when we've done nothing good. And He saves us because of His amazing grace, because He loves to do that. But having saved us, we're called to now to live these changed lives. His Holy Spirit comes in and you begin to be a new person inside. You know it. Like before, church was boring, dull. Why would you go to church? After, you're excited because you're meeting with your family, the people of God. Before, Bible, boring, dull, don't know what it is. I'm now excited to read it because I'm learning about God and learning about Jesus. Before, I don't care the way I speak to people. After the Holy Spirit comes in, I'm upset when I hurt people with my words and I go, I shouldn't have done that. I need to say sorry. This is what the Spirit of God does in us. And so now we've got a new dynamic in us that actually, believe it or not, wants to do good. Wants to bless other people rather than curse people. And we find a new love for God's people, number 1. So if you look back at chapter 1, verse 22, have a look at that. Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth, so that you have a sincere love for each other, love one another deeply from the heart, it says. For you've been born again, not of perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living and enduring Word of God. The Word of God, God uses it to make us born again, and we find that we become, got a new love for God's people, a sincere love. Love each other deeply, it says. And He also gives us a deep love for our community that aren't Christians. Of course, we have pagans. I don't know how you feel about people in Edinburgh, but I think pagans is getting pretty close to where people are at. As God's holy people are called to engage helpfully with our society, we're called to live good lives among the pagans. We're called to be a people who are looking out for ways to do positive good in the lives of others. That reflects God's character, because God keeps doing good to us. Have you noticed? Even though most of the world's rejecting Him, He keeps giving all His good gifts. Occasionally He lets the sun shine on Edinburgh to show He loves us. And He gives us plenty of rain so we never run out of water. How kind He is. He does that for everybody. God is always blessing. He's doing good to everybody, indiscriminately, all the time. And we're called to reflect Him by looking to find ways that we can do good to others in our community. People might accuse us of lots of nasty things. You can get called a vile, hateful bigot. You say, well, as Christians, they've got all these phobias. You're all, you're homophobic, homo this. All this stuff gets thrown at you, slandered. And the best response when people call you nasty names, and they say, well, you're bad, is to be busy getting on with doing good. Just ignore what they say. People will see how you live, and people will work out, actually, they're not really bad. They keep doing these amazing things. And as we live together as God's people, kind of pursuing holiness and helpfulness, it's going to draw some people to put their faith in Jesus. I don't know whether, if some of you here apparently not Christians, and I wonder why you've come to a church weekend away. I guess because you're seeing something in the people around you go, do you know what, these are nice people. They're good to be around. They're very kind. I don't get people treating me as kind in other places. And it's drawing you to think about, why are they different? And the answer why people are different is because of Jesus. That's why we're different. If there's anything good about us, it's because of Jesus. So verse 12, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and end up glorifying God on the day he visits us. So it speaks about pagans seeing lives of people going, what's going on? Why is it different? Investigating, and they say, oh, it's about Jesus, and then putting their faith in Jesus themselves. This is the great principle that Peter the Apostle is trying to work out in the rest of this letter now. It is God's will that we should do good in our society. Not because we think it's going to earn salvation. We're already saved. Saved people just do good things. Doing good things doesn't save you. But when you're saved, you start thinking, oh, I want to bless people. I want to do good. So what are some of the good things we're called to do? I wonder what you would say on the list. It's a very surprising thing. It begins in verse 13. Have a look at verse 13. What's the first word? It's a very surprising word. I'll take some audience participation. Submit. Well, it's a weird word, isn't it? Isn't that amazing? The first way I can do good is through submission. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority. It goes on to describe different human authorities. If I want to do good, I'm actually find ways to submit to the government, it says. Verses 13. We're to submit to human authorities, I guess to the police, the government, the courts, to be respectful to our teachers at school, to be respectful for those who've got leadership over us. They're actually there trying to help us. See, the best witness we can be to when government says you're up to no good is to show them, actually, no, we're really good citizens. We're good people to have in a community because we're not trying to smash the shops and steal stuff, and we're actually respectful to the teachers, and we are actually good people to have in the community because we make a difference. Verse 17's got this wonderful order. It kind of says basically, honour everyone, show proper respect to everyone. Above that, love the family of believers. Top of the list, fear God, and then back to honour the king. Honour the king is about the same level as honouring everyone, which puts the king in the right place. Honour everyone, love the family of believers, fear God, and honour the king, honour the First Minister, honour the Emperor, which puts the state in its right place. So if the state ever tells us to, as far as the state tells us to do good things, do those good things. If the state ever says disobey God, we've got to say, time out. I fear God, although I want to disobey God, so I'm sorry, I'm going to have to tap out on that one. Submission keeps going down, about showing proper respect and honour in the workplace. It deals with slaves, verse 18. There's still a bit of slavery out there, unfortunately. Most of us actually aren't slaves. We get a chance to maybe exchange effort for pay. But actually, if you've got a boss at work or a supervisor, then show respect, submit to them. Be a good employee. Don't slack off when they're not around. Be honest, show integrity, be helpful. That's part of doing good. If you're that sort of person, you're going to stand out, unfortunately. And you're going to be promoted. Because there's a lot of people who don't work like that. You can really make a lot of difference if you work like that. And in chapter 3, it's about showing proper submission within your marriage. Look at 3:1. Wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands. And it then goes on to husbands. Husbands, verse 7, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives. Treat them with respect as the weaker partner. Now, I recognise that probably there's people in this room that have not experienced this in your marriage. But if you are married, can I just say, part of doing good is showing love and respect to your spouse. For you to be a good news story in your family. Men, don't use your strength to intimidate your wife. Use your strength to serve your wife so she feels loved and secure and glad that you're her man. You know what? I mean, we haven't got time to go through all this sort of stuff, but you can just read it for yourselves. This is spelling out the sort of good that we can do as saved people that will commend the goodness of God. And maybe draw some people to say, why are you different? Oh, well, like Saul said at the beginning, I wasn't like this before, but Jesus has changed me, and that's why I'm different. We're called to be a blessing to the people of Edinburgh, and that could be being good in trying to be a good employee. I don't know, take care of your house, taking care of your garden, loving your kids, being a kind neighbour, making a positive difference to the community. People who engage in these good activities as God's holy people. Because do you know what? I was like everybody else, doing what they do, but I'm different now because I'm a royal priest. I'm part of God's spiritual temple. I'm part of His holy nation. I've got to be different here. This is God's mission plan for the church. Know who you are. You are God's holy people. Be who you are. Be holy. Be helpful. And one last quick point. Be hopeful. Be hopeful. And you'll find that in chapter 3, verse 15. Look at that. Chapter 3, verse 15. But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect and keeping a clear conscience. As people seeing us live holy lives that are helpful, they're going to say, why are you the way you are? And at that point, it's a great time to tell them the reason that you've got hope. Why have you got hope when everyone else has got despair? Well, you know why. It's Jesus. But for some reason, when that moment comes, we sort of get a bit nervous. Our hands get a bit sweaty. We feel nervous. We feel a bit tongue-tied. And the only way we're going to cross the fear barrier and actually say something about Jesus is because actually we fear Jesus more. We revere Christ as Lord. That I care more about what Jesus thinks than what the people in front of me think. When I care more about Jesus and wanting to honour Him, then I fear your reaction. Then I'm going to open my mouth and I'm going to say something about Jesus. And it says here, be prepared. Have you prepared about what you would say? If anyone said to you, why are you different? Do you know what you'd say? It's worth having a think about that, isn't it? It might be worth practicing next, when time's over. You might want to say to someone, why are you a Christian? Go on, give me your answer. What would you say? And top tip, say something about Jesus. Right? Anything about Jesus, really. And then say, come along with me to Grace Mount, and they'll tell you more about Jesus. I haven't got it all worked out yet, but I know Jesus is amazing. Come with me, and we'll find out together more about Jesus. Why are you like that? Well, because I'm convinced that Jesus rose from the dead. So there's forgiveness for my mistakes, and I've got an amazing future that not even death can get in the way of. That'd be good. That's a sentence I've thought about. But what sentence would you say? You can have a think about that. You could be prepared to use this next time to think about that. Do you know, verse 12 reminds us, back in chapter 2, verse 12, that this is how pagans become Christians. They end up glorifying God when He visits them with salvation. They meet people who are different. They say, why are you different? You tell them about Jesus, and they end up making the link to trust in Jesus themselves. Pagans become praising God people. Wonderful. Let me tell you about a few people I know. Greg, he grew up in a very dysfunctional family in Australia. His home was angry, it was violent. His parents fought a lot. They got divorced after both having multiple affairs with other people. But he discovered something amazing when he went to the house of his girlfriend. Their home was completely different. Her parents were Christians, and they showed such love and respect for each other. It amazed him. He'd never seen anything like it in his own house. The way her dad treated his wife. It was just beautiful. And he didn't quite understand what Christianity was about, but he knew it must be true because what it produced was so beautiful in her home, her peaceful, loving, caring home, that as soon as he heard about Jesus, he said, I want Jesus. If he can make a home like this. And he became a Christian, and he pastors a church in Australia. There's a guy called Mark, and comes along to our church. He didn't understand the point of life, he became depressed and increasingly self-destructive. He used to get drunk over most of the weekend, and life seemed just like an incredible burden to him. And he had some half-hearted attempts at killing himself. And in the summer of 2016, he found himself crying out that if nothing would change by the end of the year, he would be done. He was going to take his life. He was crying out. He didn't know who he was crying out to, but God heard him. And a new woman turned up at his work, and she got to know him. And she seemed so different to everyone else at work. And she invited him to come to a carol service at Charlotte Chapel. And he thought, hey, what have I got to lose? So he came along. And he was just intrigued to hear about Jesus. He kept coming along, and in the end became a Christian. And I never forget the Sunday he got baptised, because he shared how transformed his life had become. He said, one obvious change about my life, he said, is it's Sunday morning and I haven't started drinking alcohol. He said, and I no longer have suicidal thoughts. And almost overnight his speech changed. He said his speech was no longer littered with all the profanities that was in his speech before. And he found that for the first time he had a capacity for joy and love. It had all been so suppressed, he felt numb all the time. And when he gave his life to Jesus, he found a new joy and love in his heart. It blew him away. Because that's what Jesus does. He makes you born again. God had lifted him out of a pit, and his life had meaning and purpose. And he ended up marrying that girl. Pascal. He's 6'8", short cropped hair. You can see a tattoo going around the side when he got a number 1 cut. He and his wife Stephanie, who's an artist, turned up to church. They were New Age pagans. He was really into worshipping the Viking gods. She was really into tarot cards. And they wanted their daughter to learn something about Christianity, but really they came along to church to have a good laugh at the Christians. They thought it would just be amusing, something to, these idiots. But they started listening, we were going through the book of Titus, and they were listening to the message of Titus, and then they signed up to a Christianity Explored course, and they became Christians at that stage. He was the tallest guy I've ever baptised. He was 6'8". He was this huge guy. I'm not sure I was going to get him back up out of the water. The little kids came to the front. And they were their eyes went up to me, and then they went up. I said, today we're going to baptise a giant. Anyway, I baptised him. 6 months later, I went to see him, and I said, Pascal, you guys were serious pagans, weren't you? He said, oh yeah. I said, how are we going to reach more pagans with the hope of the gospel? He said, well, you told us in Titus. He said, basically, we live good lives because of Jesus. People ask us why we're different, and then we tell them about Jesus and they become Christians. Oh yeah, that's right, that's what the Bible says. It says it in Titus as well as 1 Peter. My friends, this is God's mission strategy for Grace Mount and Charlotte Chapel Be who you are. Who are you? Who are you? God's people. God's people. You're a spiritual temple. You're a royal. You're a holy. That's who you are. My goodness. You are the hope of Gracemere. You are the most hopeful people in Gracemere. So when people ask you why, say something about Jesus. Bring them along. Maybe they'll get saved too. Let's pray.